Start with the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Dear students of class second year, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome you in Pakistan International School Taif's virtual learning system. Dear students, hope you are well and you are doing hard with your studies. And it's a very serious time and it's very important for students to work hard at home. So hope you, because this is the last year of your education here in college session, so you have to work hard. Dear students, today we have lecture number 23 for grade second year and unit 6. Unit 6, cultural heritage, the past and the present. Today we are going to start the unit number 6, dear students of class second year English book, and the topic of the unit 6 is cultural heritage, the past and the present. Dear students, we are going to start today the reading selection 6.1, and the topic of reading selection 6.1 is archaeological treasures of Pakistan. Archaeological treasures of Pakistan. This is on page number 231. Please open your book on page number 231 and it will continue to 236. So here's your teacher, Sarfraz Nadeem. Dear students, this is the unit 6 and as you are well aware that we have 3 reading selections in this unit. First one we are going to learn today, read today, the archaeological treasures of Pakistan, and 2 more are left. One is essay and one is poem like Once Upon a Time. So let's start. So please open page number 231. We have pre-reading, dear students, about the archaeological treasures of Pakistan. Pakistan is rich in archaeological treasures, relics and ruins of the old civilizations, and cultural have been discovered in almost all the provinces of Pakistan. These ruins and relics reveal that the people of that period were very intelligent and civilized. From these ruins, we can easily understand what kind of ornament their women wore and what kind of weapons, agriculture implements, and tools they used. Dear students, here I wanted to add over here that the archaeological treasures are much in our Pakistan and in all provinces of Pakistan. So today we definitely in detail we will learn and we will read about these what kind of monuments or what kind of archaeological treasures we have in our Pakistan. So let's start on page number 231. Here reading selection 6.1, archaeological treasures of Pakistan, and Herbert Feldman is the writer. The archaeological treasures of Pakistan are not only rich and varied, but some of these are highly important to the history of civilization. A sometimes happens valuable monuments and remains have suffered from neglect or vandalism, but in recent years there had been a rising interest in the subject and valuable work is steadily going on. This one, the writer mentions various archaeological treasures of Pakistan. The archaeological treasures sites are a great historical importance. The most important among are the different like Texla, Mohenjo-daro, Bhambor, like this in the history of civilization. The archaeological treasures of Pakistan has a highly important place. First, it was ignored, but recently much work is done on it. No doubt. Now here we have paragraph number 2. No doubt the best known of all Pakistan's archaeological centers is that of Texla, about 30 miles northwest Rawalpindi. It is celebrated not only for the richness of what it has yielded, but for its associations with the Alexander and with Soka. One of the greatest figures of antiquity in this subcontinent. In subcontinent, there are four sites of Texla. There are, yes, four sites of Texla, which became an important center of Buddhism and the seat of a great university, already a thriving city. When Alexander came in 325 BC, Texla passed through a series of extraordinary changes. After Alexander, Chandragupta set up the Mauryan Empire in India, and his grandson Asoka, who later established Buddhism throughout the subcontinent, went there. A third Texla, now known as Skup, was built by Scythian invaders who followed by the Mauryan dynasty. Now here, dear students, the Texla in all Pakistani archaeological treasures has a luminous history. It is associated with Alexander and Asoka. Texla has four sites connected to Buddhism. Texla saw Alexander, Chandragupta, Mauryan, and Scythian invaders. Texla has the art of Gandhara, a blend of Buddhist art of the Mediterranean. The Gandhara is the associated with the Buddhism. The splendidness of Texla once yielded with the invasion of Huns in the 5th century AD. Especially, especially by reason of the work in the 1st century AD of Buddhist scholars who prepared texts associating local sites with previous incarnations of the Buddha. This gave a sacred character to the region and a great expansion of religious activity, which succumbed to the invasions of the White Huns in the 5th century AD. Next, perhaps in fame, but certainly not inferior in importance, is Mohenjo-daro, about 60 miles from Sakka in Sindh. Mohenjo-daro is only one, but undoubtedly the best known of the sites which form part of what is now referred to as the Indus Valley civilization. This ancient cradle of civilized man goes to about 5,000 years to the second and third millennia BC and is therefore contemporary with the prehistoric sites of Mesopotamia, with which is often compared. Now, here, dear students, in the second paragraph, the next important place is Mohenjo-daro, which is 60 miles from Sakkar in Sindh, forms the Indus Valley civilization. It goes 5,000 years back and it is a contemporary of Mesopotamia. Here, spine seals were discovered in 1932 and three existed as an established civilization in the Indus Valley before the arrival of the Aryan invaders. The discovery is a comparatively recent one and is due to the work of Sir John Marshall, whose interest was aroused by the discovery of Harappa in Montgomery district, now it's called Sahiwal, of some seals of apparently prehistoric origin. In 1922, an officer of the Indian Archaeological Department discovered some similar seals with while investigating a Buddhist stupa of the Koshan period at Mohenjo-daro. In the following year, further investigations were carried out. The results were not unduly interesting, but Marshall was sufficiently convinced of the substantial nature of his suspicious to carry on the work under his own direction during the following years and with most rewarding consequences. One of the most important aspects of the Mohenjo-daro discovery is its confirmation of the existence of an established civilization in the Indus Valley region before the arrival of Aryan invaders, and also the fact that more than one ethnic type was then present. The measurement of schools shows four distinct ethnic categories, of which one belongs to the Mediterranean classification. The Alpine and the Mongolian types have been identified, and also the Proto-Australite group, typical of the Aboriginal of South and Central India. All these circumstances lead to very interesting speculations, but a great deal remains to be done. Sites have in recent years been investigated which may even intended the Mohenjo-daro remains is, for instance, that the Côte d'Ivoire near Khairpur. At present, a source difficulty and stands in the way of interpretation of all these important discoveries, namely the problem of unlocking the pictographic script found at Mohenjo-daro. When this by no means simple puzzle is ultimately resolved, the results may well lead to great changes in historical and archaeological theories. Now, dear students, in this whole, we that the Bhambor is about 40 miles. We have another topic that the Mohenjo-daro, and then we have another same like in Côte d'Ivoire, Khairpur. That is also similar as like Mohenjo-daro. At present, a serious difficulty stands in the way of interpretation of all these important discoveries. One thing which was very important and to discuss over here, and that is the discovery. What was kind of discovery was its sites confirm is its confirmation of the existence of an established civilization in the Indus Valley. So when they dig the Mohenjo-daro, they found many things, but they got that guess that here the people who were living, they were very civilized people, and this is all about might be the 5,000 years ago. Even more recent and of great interest to Pakistan is the work done at Bhambor, a site on one of the silted channels of the Indus, about 40 miles from Karachi and very easy of access to Karachi dwellers. The particular interest of Bhambor lies in the possibility that it is the site of Debul where Muhammad bin Qasim landed. The question of the actual whereabouts of this place has long offered material of archaeological disputation, and although Bhambo was considered a possibility, serious work was not started there until 1958. The results have so far been well worth the effort, and a mosque has already been uncovered, which apparently dates from about 150 years after the commencement of the Muslim era, and this begins to get close to the time of Muhammad bin Qasim himself. But it seems the site may well yield a good deal more than this, and at the present stage, it is not possible to say how far the digging may extend. Work is also to be done at Brahmanabad, about 43 miles northeast of Hyderabad, where Dahir Muhammad bin Qasim's adversary made his last stand. Last stand. So, dear students, this paragraph is about the Bhambor. Bhambor is about 40 miles from Karachi. It is an easy accessible site to the Karachi dwellers. It is the site of Debul, the place where Muhammad bin Qasim landed. A mosque has been discovered there, which is dated close to the Muhammad bin Qasim and 150 years after the start of the Muslim era. The Buddhist memories are not confined to the northwest but spread to Sindh. Here, Buddhist seals of the 7th and 8th century have been discovered. The ebb and flow of different influences, the religious, intellectual, and military, mm, have left their various marks on the antiquities of Pakistan. Of Buddhist memorials, perhaps enough has been said. Although it deserves to be added that they are not confined to the northwest but extended down to Sindh and at Amirpur Khas. East of Hyderabad, Buddhist seals of the 7th and 8th centuries AD have been discovered. Some of the monuments unallowed represent the culture of the country where they originated. The celebrated tiled mosque and tombs of Thatta, there is purely Iranian as if they had been transplanted. However, despite the interest and the importance of all these things, it is probable that the part of Pakistan's antique monuments which excites the principal interest is that associated with the Mughals. This seems to be so not merely because of the importance and the comparative nearness of that dynasty to our own time, but also for the more obvious reason that their monuments are not surprisingly in a better state of preservation and are more accessible. So here these some of the buildings show Iranian style, but the Pakistan's antique monuments are associated with the Mughals. These monuments are preserved very carefully, and the sites can see the skills of the Hindu stone carvers and masons in the palaces. It is in this respect, Lahore, although an ancient city, is richly endowed. Much certainly has suffered during the disturbed times that followed the decline of the Mughals and more particularly during the anarchic state of the Punjab after the death of Ranjit Singh. But there is still a great deal to reward the sightseer. Here, particularly, will be noticed the style which grew out of the architectural ambitions of the conquering Mughals and the skills of Hindu stone carvers and masons, applied to the places, gardens, and tombs which the new rulers built. There is free use of the human and animal form, and the prolixity of detail is unmistakably Hindu in style as well as in conception. Now here, dear students, the sighters can see the skills of the Hindu stone carvers and masons in the places, gardens, and tombs made by the new rulers. They will wish to see the old city, the fort, Badshai Mosque, and the houses of great families in Lahore. Most visitors to Lahore will wish to see the old city, the fort, the Badshahi Mosque, one of the important monuments of Aurangzeb's time, and the houses of some of the great families which once flourished there. Some of the old buildings have been put to use very different from those for which they were once intended. One such is the tomb built for Anarkali, the tragic maiden names Pomegranate Flower, who had a love affair with Prince Salim. When he became emperor and adopted the name Jahangir, he built a tomb over the burial place with an inscription testifying of his love. Later in the declining days of the Mughals, the building was used to residential purposes and was once occupied by Ventura, the Italian soldiers of the fortune who served as one of the Ranjit Singh's generals. It is now used to keep archives in and is well worth a visit. Now, dear students, the tomb of Anarkali, Prince Salim's lover, a significant place is now used for archives purposes. There are also some other places, gardens and tombs in Lahore and in some other cities of the country. So, dear students, this is the about the lesson, and hope so you understood. Now we have a new vocabulary over here. You can see the words are given, and the meaning of these words are also here on the page number 235 and 236. So I think it is very easy for you to understand the lesson, and then there's no any confusion regarding this. Then we have a question, study questions on page 236. Question number one is, what are the most important archaeological sites of Pakistan? What light do they throw on the antiquity in this part of the world? I think it's with the most important archaeological sites of Pakistan are Taxila, Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Bambor. They reflect the culture, religion, civilization, and the art of the people. Taxila gives information about the Gandhara art, which shows the skills of Hindu masons. Mohenjo-daro is famous for Indus Valley civilization. Harappa throws light on the seals of apparently prehistoric origin, and Bhambor throws light on Debul, where Muhammad bin Qasim landed. And then we have the question number two, what is the importance of Texla as an archaeological site? I think very easy for you. As an archaeological site, Texla is very important as it is associated with the greatest figure of antiquity, Alexander and Ashoka. The four sites of Texla became an important center of Buddhism and seat of a great university. The art of Gandhara is blend of Buddhist art of Mediterranean influences, which has a unique contribution to archaeological treasures of Pakistan. So same we have question number 3, 4, and 5 as well, dear students, and then we have writing assignments on page 237. So this is the all about today's lesson, dear students, and then we have another topic for today. So this was the first topic about the lesson which we completed, and unit 6 as we started the cultural heritage in the past and the present, and we learned archaeological treasures of Pakistan. So hope you understand. If you have any query, any problem, I'm on available on Zoom. You can ask me over here. Language study, dear students, grammar, we have figures of speech. Today we are going to learn figures of speech, language study, grammar section. Some number one is simile. First, you are well aware because you learned this in class 9th and 10th and first year as well. So again, we are in here in class second year about the simile. What is simile? In a simile, a comparison is made between two objects of different kinds, which have, however, at least one point in common. They are actually, dear students, different two objects, but they have one point in common, that is called simile. One more thing which you are supposed to keep in your mind is the simile is used where we compare something with other. Comparison it is means we use is and like. Is and like is used. Like he is like a lion, or the flower is like a moon, for example. So you are supposed to use the word like or is. Example, the Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold. The righteous shall flourish as the palm tree. Words are like leaves and where they most bound. So these are the examples of the simile. You can see here in first we use like, in second sentence we use as, and third sentence also like. So like and as are used. A comparison of two things of the same kind is not a simile. If you're talking about same kind, it is not like. Life is a dream. So here we don't have any word is or like. Or if you're talking about the same thing, if you are going to compare the two same things, that is not a simile. Our second example, the camel is the ship of desert. So it is obvious, it is very true, very much true, that camel is the ship of desert. So we cannot say the camel is like a ship. Like means when you are supposed to compare, but here is nothing. So simile is used when we are going to compare to different objects, and we use the word like or as. That is called simile. We have number two, number second, metaphor. And here we will learn what is a metaphor. Is a common figure of speech that makes a comparison by directly relating one thing or another unrelated thing. What we are going to compare, dear students? You have to listen very carefully. Metaphor is a common figure of speech that makes a comparison by directly relating one thing to another unrelated thing. Means second thing should be unrelated. One related and second related. Unlike similes, metaphors do not use words such as like or as to make comparisons. But dear students, in this metaphor, we do not use the word like or as. As you in the previous slide, we learned that in simile, we use two words like and as. That he is the flower or the room is shining like a star. So word like is used or the word as is used in simile, but in metaphor, we do not use the word like or as, but we give the same comparison, but we do not use the word as or like. Example, Richard fought like a lion. This is a simile. You look over here, like is used. So we say Richard fought like a lion. So here you use simile. But how to use metaphor? Richard was a lion in the fight. Ah, so it means, dear students, metaphor is used when we do not use the word like or an. Again, the first sentence, Richard fought like a lion. So it is called a simile. Why? Because like is used and Richard, the human, its comparison is given with the lion. But here, second sentence, we say Richard was a lion in the fight. The same meaning is over here in both sentences. But in the second sentence, in metaphor, we do not use the word like or is. A third sentence, variety is the spice of life. Variety is the spice of life. Here, even you can say there's no any word like or is used. So this is called a metaphor. Number three is personification. Number three is personification. In personification, inanimate objects, abstract notions are spoken of as having life and intelligence. Again, in personification, inanimate objects, abstract notions are spoken of as having life and intelligence. Again, I will say in personification, dear students, I wanted to use that human character is involved. Are such objects which are used by human, they are giving in personification. For example, in section strength that obey front, or laughter holding both her sides, death lays his cry hand on kings. Pride goeth forth on horseback, grand and gay, but cometh back on foot and begins in its way. Our simple example, I will let you know about the personification, dear students. You can say that what is the personification. In personification, dear students, you can say that, for example, the the branches were covered with the blanket of snow. The branches were covered with blanket of snow. So now blanket is used by the human, not by the animals, not by the such objects which are like trees. So here we give comparison. The branches of trees were covered with snow, not but with blanket of snow. So that is the human object is involved over here. So that is personification. Irony, dear student, number last we have irony. Irony is a mode is a mode of speech in which the real meaning is exactly the opposite of that which is literally conveyed. Again, irony is a mode of speech in which the real meaning is exactly the opposite of that which is literally conveyed. Now, it's a dear students, the meaning is irony is actually you are going to say something, but it has another meaning or opposite meaning. For example, this is definitely used ironical criticism. Dear students, you have heard ironical criticism means ironical criticism. Sometimes you are criticize someone that you don't have a good dress today. So it is directly you are supposed to criticize someone. But if you are say actually the person doesn't have a good dress and you say, oh, what a dress you have, it seems very beautiful. or it suits on you like this, but it isn't against that dress doesn't suit on him, or that is not good dress. So you are supposed to ironical, giving the ironical criticism, like, no doubt, but you are the people, and wisdom shall die with you. So I think, no doubt, but you are the people, and wisdom shall die with you, means this is directly or indirectly you are supposed to criticize someone, that you don't have a wisdom, or wisdom is just going to die with you. So this is, dear students, about the irony. And many figure of speeches are over here on page number 239, 40, 241, 42, 43, even 44, 45, until 246 and 7. Many climax as there, exclamation is there, interrogation is there. So you can read these figure of speeches, and then we have few exercises on page number 248, 49, 50, and 51. You can use these sentences, or you are supposed to find out the figure of speeches from these sentences. So still you have any query, any problem, you can ask me on Zoom, dear students. I'm available. And this is all about today's lecture, dear students. See you tomorrow with the new lecture. Till there, dear students, Allah Hafiz.